streaming live at radioislam.com, where you can tap into all of our prior shows as well. To add to the conversation, you can post on our Facebook wall at Radio Islam 1450 or tweet us at Radio Islam 1450. Today, I'm going to be discussing the visual arts, the arts of painting and visuals. And my first guest is Hajra Meeks. She is a Pakistani-American author, illustrator, and fine artist from California's Bay Area. She is currently working on culturally diverse children's books and producing data visualizations that combine art and interactive information. She lectured at the University of California for 4 years and studied children's literature at the Vermont College of Fine Arts. Her bachelor's in physics was completed at the University of San Francisco and her master's in international history at the London School of Economic and Political Science. She's had many exhibitions including The Splendor of Islamic Art, Exploring Art in Eastern Lands, and Picture Book Process. She is the author and illustrator of An Alphabet Journey. Welcome to our show, Hajra.
Oh, thank you so much, sister. That's so wonderful. Wonderful to be here.
Yes. I actually I discovered your work online looking at the International Women's Museum website. And I was really attracted to your artwork. And I checked you out, your website, so I definitely would love to talk to her. And it's very interesting. I want to start off with you actually went to school, for physics and history and teaching and also studying children's literature. So do you combine those? I see in the alphabet book kind of the history of the animal that you have. So how else do you combine, or are you combining your physics as well with your children's literature in your book?
Oh, it's an amazing process. It's beautiful. I mean, information is beautiful and God is beautiful. And I mean, to me, everything that I've studied, I think it ends up as something beautiful in my books or in my writing. So, I mean, you have the physics and, you have optics and physics, and you have color theory, and you've got wavelengths, and you've got geometry, and you can bring all of that to your composition and layout. And when it comes to the history and the theology and the philosophy, you can bring that to your writing and your multicultural book. So I think everything informs your work, so it's amazing.
Wow, I love it. I love it. Now, what made you choose the medium of watercolors?
Well, for me, it's a few choices. And first of all, I love a challenge, and watercolor is notoriously difficult to work with. So, I mean, I really like that, there's a challenge there, and it's not as easy to master as acrylic or oil.
Yes.
But I also liked the diversity of it. You can make it so washy, and you can make it slightly more realistic, or you make it super realistic so it looks like, you can trick somebody into thinking it's an oil painting. So you can do all of that with watercolor. And then the other part of it is I am very environmentally aware. I like to think I am. And, to me, I think it's my responsibility as a Muslim to be that way. And watercolor is the most environmentally friendly medium, even though it is the most expensive one, because what ends up happening is you just have gum Arabic and water. And then with acrylic and oil, you've got all sorts of chemicals. So you don't have that with watercolor.
I didn't even think about that. Yes, because I'm looking like, wow, this is one of the most difficult paints to work with. I've worked with just dabbling in different arts and paints and classes, and I was like, wow, it really takes someone creative on another level to actually explore and do this every day, like working with watercolors. So, yeah.
Oh, yes. I was wondering. Yes. Well, I mean, just like with Islam, you have to submit. I think with watercolors, you have to submit because you have to sit there and you have to sort of say, well, this is doing stuff that I don't necessarily plan for, but you have to sort of try to roll with it. So I think it's actually a good exercise in meditation somehow.
Wow, I love it. Now, you actually wrote and illustrated the alphabet book. Let's talk about that. Was that your first book?
That was my first book that I did independently. I wrote a handful of manuscripts while I was studying at the Vermont College of Fine Arts, and right out of there I realized that, it takes a lot longer to illustrate one, and I do all my own illustrations, so I have a whole lot of manuscripts written out, but not very many drawn out. And I really wanted to do this one first because it's about the first wolf back in California in almost a century. And this is a real wolf, and wolves were native to California before we hunted them all down and ran them out. So I figured that this was a very timely issue to me because, he could be killed or, It was something that a lot of people were lobbying for or against. And also, as an immigrant myself, I mean, I'm Pakistani American. I've been here my whole life, but my parents came here, and I can certainly, empathize with the feeling of feeling like you belong someplace, but somebody else doesn't feel like you belong there. And I think that he is an immigrant, and I'm an immigrant, and so I feel like that was something that I had to write about. It really spoke to me. So it was a nonfiction book, and I didn't want to write a nonfiction book because, it was an alphabet book, but you can't write a fictional story about a real animal, so...
I love it. I love that you said he's an immigrant. I'm an immigrant. I never thought about him that way, so it's really interesting because I was reading the history of it, and I was like, oh, okay, I can see here how she combined her history, with the art. Also, I just love how you said you collaborated with your husband, who actually has to create digital humanities projects. He has digital humanities projects at Stanford University, but to create them for parents and teachers and children. So if you can talk a little bit about some of them. I saw you have the interactive map for your book, An Alphabet Journey. How did you guys sit down and tell me the story of coming up with this collaboration?
Oh, yeah. Well, what was amazing about this is, I've done other stuff for, publishers here and there, and one of the reasons I didn't, you don't really have any say. You do the illustrations for them, or you sort of walk away. And with this project, I said, okay, well, this is my own project, and I feel like for this day and age, for this generation, we should have an interactive supplement because all of these kids grow up with computers. And, we ourselves are very familiar with them. And my husband is, of course, a senior data visualization engineer in the digital humanities. And I thought, well, I have this amazing resource. Why shouldn't I use this? And he can build these amazing things for scholars where you do interactive stuff with, huge sets of data. So you can look at Chinese history or ancient Roman maps and turn it into an interactive Google Maps for ancient Rome. So I thought, well, this wolf is traveling through Oregon and California, and he goes through these different counties and past these highways and different ecosystems. So I want a accurate satellite data map of where this wolf has traveled. And I want to be able to roll over that and for kids and teachers and librarians to be able to click on it so they can see, is he wandering through, an area of forest, an area of desert, an area where there's basins, is he going past places where there's bears or golden eagles or cattle or farms, and all of this is available, using real data. And so he can put it together in an accurate map, and then it can become a classroom discussion of not just a book, but also of, nature and environmentalism and to some extent, California history.
Wow, I think it really, like you said, fascinating, especially with children and technology. And I know I have children, and they can work it better than I can, even my 3-year-old. So I love that
yes.
you're, doing that.
Yeah,
now what other? I know you
turned free, so.
Oh wow, great.
Yes.
I saw
so you have go on the. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say that it's, I wanted to make sure anybody could look at it. So even though you buy the book, the interactive map is for anybody online on my website, and same thing for the interactive color. And anything that goes with my books that's an interactive supplement, I thought anybody should be able to play with it. So it's all there on my website.
I know. We're going to have so much fun playing with it. I did it by myself, but I guess I should include my 3-year-old in it. But it was so much fun just for me. Now, I want to talk about, I know you're currently working on books now. You said just diversity for children. What are some of the topics that you're exploring right now for your new book?
Well, some of the main scripts that I've done actually have to do with post 9/11 and, a small boy. I wrote a book called The Day That Omar Disappeared. And I really don't know if somebody's going to mainstream publish that. I have these other things that people might want to look at, or, I worked on their projects. But this is rather controversial for a mainstream publisher. But it's about a little boy who feels like he's disappeared after the World Trade Towers come down because he is an American. He's a little boy, but he's also a Muslim. And his friends stop speaking to him, or they just say sort of as a joke on the playground, oh, you're one of them, or, your people brought those towers down. And, I was in college when 9/11 happened, and I couldn't imagine how I would have felt if I'd been younger, because it was already so hard to have some of my classmates in certain classes making comments, and I just knew that at some point I would have to write about it. Because if you, I know it changed my life. And, I just thought to myself, I love all these books, and I read all these books. And would people treat me this way if Harry Potter or Stuart Little or Matilda, or if one of these people was Muslim, would I be treated this way? Maybe they would like me better. Is one of my favorite characters was also a Muslim.
Wow. That's going to be something that I know can resonate with a lot of the children. And I'm looking forward to that. That is something different. It's innovative. Now to you, with that being innovative, what does the word to you mean, innovative? I know I hear that a lot in art, like I want to be innovative or authentic or creative. What does that mean to you when you hear that?
Well, honestly, when you talk about innovative, you're talking about people in a strategy community like art or academe, and I'm in a few fields of both, where you're trying to introduce something that might be groundbreaking to them, and so you're trying to ease it onto them. But unless you've discovered a new principle or wavelength in physics, it's not necessarily innovative. It's more like it's somebody's been hedged out of a particular field. That's the way I see it. I think when Malcolm X was talking about being innovative, he wasn't talking about something that he had just found out or created. He found like it was something that these people needed to give him, but to them it was innovative. And so he was being, and I think it's the same way when you talk about this, is that we shouldn't have to have a discussion of, anytime you're celebrating a certain book for being multicultural, then you haven't gotten to the point where multiculturalism has been assimilated in the way that somebody like, Ezra, Keats wanted, or any of these other author illustrators who really wanted, this kind of multiculturalism to not be noticed while you were writing books. If we notice it, then it's innovative. And once we've stopped noticing it, then it's a part of our mainstream culture, which is beautiful, but we haven't gotten there yet.
So you're saying, like, when we get over all the different racism and prejudices and things in society, then maybe we can actually move to real innovation because this is kind of healing.
Yes, absolutely. I think if we all could focus less on, trying to fight for, unfortunately, human rights and equality and not having the kind of prejudices we have towards, say, we sort of, everybody, looks at Islam and puts one label on it. Islamophobia is really, I've talked to people who are coming from a field of history or from the field of theology or philosophy, and they really want to make it into this monolithic demon and not realize just how vibrant and diverse and beautiful a lot of these cultures are, or to look at the few cultures that are abrading Islam and saying that these are the abrasive cultures, and that's not really the religion. That's the culture versus the religion, and you can apply that to anything from FGM to, not letting women drive in other countries or any of that stuff. That's not Islam. That's the culture of that particular region. And so I think that once you move away from stereotyping all of that and then you assimilate all the beautiful things of these cultures, then all of a sudden you can move on to, like you said, real science and real innovation, and maybe we can do better things and maybe save all the polar bears or something.
And I always said that. I said, wow, a lot of times we dig back and, I study history a lot in history, and we talk about how people, did these amazing things, come from their mind, building pyramids. I'm like, shouldn't we be beyond that now? It's almost like we kind of went backwards in a way, like you said, just to even respect each other or to understand, so we can really move to something beyond the level of our ancestors. So,
absolutely,
yes,
absolutely.
So you talked about your book and how it picked up for major publishers. So, what would you do in that case? Would you just self-publish?
Well, I think that's another thing that's interesting. I've been to some really large conferences which are on the international and national level for children's book writing and illustration. And it's very obvious that publishing fields and publishers and editors are rather frightened of how the industry is sort of coming down around their ears, and they're very scared. Amazon and digital publishing used to be at the very, very outset something like, oh, that's just vanity publishing. But now you have platforms like Kickstarter where you can get $8,000 for a book like mine, and that means I actually got a real advance on it, and I have a real audience that's hopefully built in and is going to buy the book later. And after that, you can sort of say, well, the people chose to have this book published, or, and that's by not just getting it onto something like Kickstarter, but also on Amazon. You can get those reviews and get people to look at it and have your website. So you have this global audience that can help choose a book and make it possible and then also keep it selling. And therefore, the publisher has become a middleman that you can take out. And that's important, I think, especially if they're following trends and being too safe. I mean, I don't want to write smut. So if I was going to write young adults and I have to write smut or smutty vampire books or smutty werewolf books, well, I'm not going to do that. That's not what I'm, willing to do just so I can be published. And I'm also not going to do that for children's books. I mean, if I have to write about some really spoiled child that's breaking everything in a house and he's painted poorly and he's written about poorly, well, that's not my thing. I wasn't here to do that. My favorite books, I've been told by people, well, you're doing something that people don't do anymore, or you're doing something that people wouldn't want to read, or something that isn't mainstream enough. I was like, well, I guess I'll just have to find people who will read it, because I think that if I feel like reading it, there must be other people out there, too, that think this is mainstream enough. So, yeah.
Yeah. I love it. And it's I've had that conversation many times about the music industry as well. There's always an audience for what you have. We're actually going to take a quick break. And when we come back, I just want to talk more about your upcoming projects and just kind of your background of how you got started with science and art and literature, and how your mind actually, came up with, okay, I'm going to do it all. So we're going to take a quick break. So stay with us. After the break on Radio Islam, we'll continue our conversation with Hajra Meeks.
Is that a faucet running? That's not a faucet. That's a river rushing through the forest. Forest rivers provide over 100 million people with clean water to drink.
What? I can't hear you because of the vacuum.
That's not a vacuum. That's the trees in the forest cleaning up the air we breathe.
I didn't know the trees were so amazing.
Yep, and the forest gives us shade, trees to climb.
That's awesome. Let's go explore some more.
Visit the forest today and enjoy all it does, just for you. To learn more about the forest and find one near you, go to discovertheforest.org. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service and the Ad Council.
Radio Islam. You're not a Facebook fan of Radio Islam? It's not too late. Our doors are always open at facebook.com/Radio Islam 1450. We are always a part of the family.
You're listening to Radio Islam at WCEV 1450 AM Chicago. We reach the world by streaming live at radioislam.com. We can also review all of our prior shows. Radio Islam is a talk show on the air every night from 6 to 7 p.m. Central Time. You can also connect with us on our Facebook page at Radio Islam 1450 or tweet us at Radio Islam 1450. I'm your host, Taslim Jamila El Hakim, and I'm talking with visual artist, author, scientist, and much more, Hajra Meeks. So we left off talking about just innovation and how you combined everything together with your children's literature. So you study that in undergrad, and then physics and history. So how did this all come together? What came first as a young child? Let's go back to young Hajra when you were little and maybe painting, I don't know, on the floor or on the walls.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I could read when I was 3.5, and I was painting very soon thereafter, but I love to read. I mean, my mother would carry books back from the Hayward Public Library, because this was where I grew up, was Hayward in Union City in California's Bay Area. And I would have to have a limit on how many books I could check out, because we'd have to walk back with them. So this is literally how much you could carry. And so, I mean, I was obsessed with falling into a different world. And I loved I loved natural stuff. I loved science. I mean, anything that I felt like I could absorb from, it was amazing. And to me, the storytelling aspect of any of these fields was amazing. And, I knew I wanted to study art and writing, but by the time I got to, even though I liked math and science, my favorite thing to do was the art and writing. So my parents, being Pakistani American, told me, well, you should be a doctor or a dentist or, something like that. And when I got to college, they said, well, the most sensible thing for you to do would be to study physics, because, then you can do your art and your writing on the side, and you can have a job as, say, an engineer, or you can go into pre-med or something. So I did study physics, and I did miss not being able to study art and writing for that entire 4 years. But all I can say now is I'm glad I did, because having all those analytical skills with the math and the application and the thinking and the logic, I think it really helps me, be a lot more organized and, and figure out my projects in a way that some artists do not. So,
wow.
And so And for my master's degree, I mean, I was 9/11 happened when I was at college, and I was just a freshman and or a sophomore. I can't remember. It was one of those 2 years, and I was just thinking to myself, I can't just study physics. I have to study something where I can speak about my people to other people, and they'll say, okay, well, she studied this, so she has a right to talk about history. And so I said I have to study international history or religion or something. So I added a minor in history, and then for my master's degree, I went to London. I studied at the London School of Economics for international history. And I was very blessed that it's a very good program, and it was very rigorous, which initially made me cry when I got there. I was like, oh, my God, I was in physics, and I thought that was easy. Now, what is this? I can't believe it's so hard. But, I felt like if I tried, that alhamdulillah, if you try, God makes stuff easier for you. And so also it's a challenge and you learn, you do become smarter. It is good for you to have a challenge. And so I did that. And after I was done, I thought to myself, I've burned through this and I feel like I've burned through this. And now I feel like I need to express myself the same way that I feel like these books captured that when I was a child. And I feel like, if you go all the way back to old things that people did and go back to the Paleolithic cave paintings in Lascaux, these people were drawing their horses and their cattle and their hunting parties on the walls. And to them, that was their language. It wasn't the way we even see art now. It was their writing. It was the way they expressed themselves, how they were successful hunting, their story, their lives. So words and pictures, to me, become the same thing. And in that sense, words become they're less important than pictures. Pictures become the best words to me. And so in that sense, that you can tell a story, especially for children, in a picture book, half of the story is in the pictures, and then half of the story is in the words. And then if you bring to that this multicultural thing, I think that it would be invaluable. I felt like instead of talking to grown-ups, I felt like the best thing to do to talk about history or multiculturalism or theology would be to talk to children, because children care in a way that adults don't, I think, So, I all the people that I liked best, Native Americans, anything that I loved growing up, they were characters in books that I read, I loved Island of the Blue Dolphins. I loved Elizabeth George Spears' books. I loved, Stuart Little, and, all of these books. I thought to myself, you know what, if I write these books and kids like these books, then maybe they will understand more about other cultures. So I wanted to do that.
Wow, I love it. So just the amazement of learning to read. We have about 2 minutes left. So I want you to talk about now. You talked about your parents, and it was, typical parents I've heard, in the Pakistani family. Be a doctor, be an engineer. How do they feel now about your work?
I guess they have got to have their cake and eat it too, because my parents worked really hard with all three of their kids, and my sister's a doctor and my brother's an engineer, and then I'm a historian and an author illustrator, so they're like, oh, okay, well, I guess it's okay if one of them went in that direction. But my dad's mother was a poet, and my mother's father was a great artist. So I think even though they have their family as dentists and doctors and whatever, they also have this in the family. And I'm glad that I maybe got some of those people's blood and got to carry the artistic tradition on. So,
wow, I love it. So just the last minute, any advice or just words of wisdom, someone who wants to combine the two, just say they want to be, get into science or a scientist and an artist. Just any advice.
The best advice for anything is to read. I remember I just read again recently that Malcolm X said, when somebody asked him, what's your alma mater? And he said, books. He read 8 years in jail. He read books and turned himself into one of the smartest people of our century. And you can read books about anything and turn yourself into a scholar of anything. It's actually the official term. You read 20 books or, official books on something, you become an amateur scholar. So read about anything and you'll learn.
I love it. Thank you so much. So, it's been amazing having you, just even with that thought. That's something I'm going to, I always emphasize that with my children. So you've been amazing inspiration today. So thank you so much. And I can't wait till your new book comes out. Oh, my God. That's exciting.
Thank you so much, sister. Your voice is so beautiful. Your personality is so beautiful. It's been lovely being here.
Oh, alhamdulillah. Thank you. That was Hajra Meeks. And check her out on her website at HajraMeeks.com, or we have a link on our SoundCloud.com, Radio Islam 1450. We're going to take a break.